All right, guys, so in this video, I want to take a look at the event object that's available to us when we add an event listener and then we run a function. So these right here are just some of the properties on the event object that I want to take a look at. We'll get to that in a second. But first, let's go ahead and take an element from the DOM. Let's just do the logo again. So that's the image, and I'm going to add an event listener onto that. So logo.add event listener. We'll just use a click event, and then I'll pass in a function here. Now, these functions that we pass in can take in an optional event object, and you might see it as E, you might see it as event, you might see it as EVT. E is usually what I use, it's just preference, but it could technically be anything. And then let's just do a console log of that event object. So now if I come over here and I click on the logo, we're going to see this in the console. So this is the event object with a bunch of different properties and methods on it. Okay, and these are all in here, but it's not all of them. I'm not going to go over every single one right now. Some of these you just will never use anyway. Now, this doesn't matter if you pass in an anonymous function like this, or if we create a separate function, like let's say function on click. So even if we do it this way, we're still going to have access to that event object. So what I'll do is just replace this with that named function of onClick. And if I click on the logo, we get the same thing. All right, now the first two that I want to show you are target and current target. So target is the element that triggered the event. All right, so basically the element that you click on. So let's go ahead and log e.target. In this case, when we click on the logo, we're going to see the image tag because that's what we clicked on. Now, the current target is the element that the event listener is attached to. Now, in this case, these are the same, right? So whether I do current target or if I do current target, so if I do that, I'm going to see image twice because it's the same thing, right? I clicked on the image and the event is also attached to the image. Now, it can be different. I'm going to show you that in a second, but I just want to mention that you can use this e.target or current target. Most of the time, you'll probably be using target, but you can use this to do certain things to that element. So for instance, I could take e.target and then take the style and change, let's say, the background color and set that to black. So if I click this now, you'll see that the background turns black. So if you need to access the event that's clicked on, you can use e.target and you can do anything to it as if it were just an element you brought in with query selector. All right, now as far as the difference here, I want to show you where it would be different. So if we put on the body, just document.body, and then we add an event listener, right? So add event listener, and we do a click event, and then we have a function, and then I'm going to copy both of these console logs here and paste this in. Now, if I click on, let's say this list item right here, if I click on that, oops, I forgot to pass in the event object. If I click on that, you'll see I get two different things here because the event is put onto the body, and that's what current target is. It's whatever the event is attached to. The target is whatever I clicked, and then in this case I clicked the LI, which is in the body. So basically what happens is events bubble up. If I click on the list item, that event bubbles up to the parent, which would be the UL, and then bubbles up to that parent and that parent all the way up to the body, up to the HTML. And I'm going to go over event bubbling soon. But that causes us to get two different things for target and current target if we put a listener on something like the body. When we put it on the image, there's obviously nothing is nested inside of that we'd click on. We're clicking on the image, and that's where the event is. But there is a difference between those two. All right, so let's look at some of these other ones. We have type. So let's see. I'll just comment these out, and let's console log e dot type. So now if I go and I click on the logo, the type is a click. So that's the type of event that was triggered. Okay, so if you want to access that, the timestamp, so I guess we'll just copy that down and let's say timestamp. If I click on it, that gave me undefined. That's because it should be an uppercase S. Okay, so it gives us a timestamp, and that's going to change obviously whenever I click on it. But if you need to access that for some reason, then we also have these positioning coordinates. So client X and client Y, this is the X and Y position of the mouse click relative to the window. All right, so let's try that. Let's do E dot client X. So the X axis is always going to be horizontal. Okay, so it's from right to left. And then Y is going to be top to bottom. So if we save that and let's click on the corner of this image right here, and you might get something slightly different, but what we get was 27 and 58. So what that means is my cursor, or my arrow, when I click, is 27 over from the left on the x-axis and 58 down from the y-axis. If I move down a little bit, you'll see now I get 26 for the x and I get 105 for the y because I'm further down. Okay, so that's what those coordinates are. Now we have some other ones as well, like offset X and offset Y. That's going to be the mouse click relative to the element. All right, so what I'll do is let's copy these, and then what are we looking at? Offset. So we'll take these and change that to offset. And now if I click in the corner here, I get 10 and 11. So I'm slightly over to the left and down. If I go up a little bit and over to the left, 3 and 8. If I come way down here to this corner, 42, 53. So it's the coordinates of where I click within this element, okay? Not from the page like the client, but the offset is going to be within that element. Then we have the page X and Y, which is going to be the position of the mouse click relative to the page, okay? Not the window, but the page, which is going to be very similar. So if we were to, let's change this and this to page. And if we come over here and click, if I click like right here, it's going to be from the page, you know, from the Y, or the X is 29 and the Y is 61. Now if I make this bigger to where this is pushed way over and I click, now you'll see we get 503 on the X. So there's a lot of space right here, and still 62 here. That's not going to change unless I resize the browser the other way. All right, so that's getting the page. Now you can also do the screen. There's a screen X and screen Y, and that's going to be your entire monitor. So if we were to do that, and this is going to be different depending on the size of your screen. I have a ultra wide, so the X is going to be pretty large. So if I do that, so we get 366 from the top and 2916 from the left. All right, so, and there's other properties on here, but I'm not going to go over every single one right now. Let's see, I wanted to talk about the method prevent default. That's something that you're going to use quite a bit when you're dealing with forms. And what that does is it stops the prevent default of the behavior. And with a form, if you're dealing with front-end JavaScript for validation, or maybe you're making a fetch request or whatever it might be, and you don't want the form to actually submit to the page, then you would use prevent default. Okay, you could even use it on a link. So if we come over here to the HTML, and I'll just put a temporary link somewhere in here. All right, so let's just say we have a link to, say, Google, and save. So right now, if I click on that, obviously it takes me to Google. But let's say I want to put an event on that link, and I want to stop that behavior of bringing me to google.com. So I'll say document.query selector, and it's the only link on the page, so I'm just going to use A. And then let's add an event listener. Oops. Let's say we want a click event, and then we have our function pass in our event object. And then instead of going to the page, I want to stop it with prevent default, which is a method. So we want our parentheses. Okay, and then let's say I just want to have a console log instead and just say link was clicked. So if I save that now and I come over here and I click the Google link, you'll see it doesn't take me anywhere because of this. It prevents the default behavior. And then it will do whatever JavaScript I have underneath. Okay, so like I said, that's really common when you have a form that you don't actually want to submit to a page, because you'll see it actually submits to this page. See how that changes to the spinner? You can stop that with event e.prevent default, which we'll be doing quite a bit throughout the course. Now, some of these values can be dynamic, like the client X, client Y. If we have, let's say, a drag event, then that will constantly change. So let me just give you an example here. So I'm gonna, let's see, we'll just add another event listener to the logo. Let's say logo.add event listener, and this time I'm going to listen for a drag event. Remember, we looked at that in the I think it was the last video. And then we'll do on drag. Oops, I don't want to do that. So we'll create a function here called on drag, and we'll pass in our event object. And then what I want to do here, we could console log, but let's go ahead and add it to the page. So we'll select, let's say, query selector, and we'll select the H1, and then let's set the text content and set it to some backticks, so a template string, and then we can say, we'll say X, and then we'll give the X value by putting in a variable or a JavaScript expression here of e.client X. Remember, because we have access to that event object, so we can use that for anything. All right, then we'll do Y, and let's put in here e.client Y. So now if I save and then I click on this and drag it, you'll see that the H1 now changes to the X and Y values. So that's how you can create really dynamic stuff within the browser, like games and so on. It's tracking positions and using events. But this is what I mean when I say just try out like stupid little things like this, which obviously doesn't make much sense. You wouldn't have this in a real project, but it gives you practice on everything, really. Creating events, selecting items or elements, using the event object, whatever. Okay, so that is the event object. We'll be using much more of it throughout the course. In the next video, we're going to look at some keyboard events.